Evaluation question 3. What have you learned from your audience feedback? This one will be for my poster. So if we go into research and planning, and we go down to the categories and click on my poster, we'll scroll all the way back to the beginning of the year. Okay, so not all of the things in this category will be audience feedback, but I will skip the ones that aren't. So if we scroll up a little bit past these posts that aren't audience feedback, we go to poster draft 1, and this is basically what my idea was for the poster layout. You can see the two victims in front of the bonfire with the person in the middle, the antagonist in the middle there. And after I drew this, I didn't actually get much audience feedback for that poster draft because I wanted people to be able to see the colours and things like that instead of just seeing the layout. So that's why I made the second poster draft, which was this one, where I basically just quickly went on Photoshop and drew the layout with the colours. And what people didn't really get when I asked them on Facebook was that I was actually trying to show them where the pictures would go and what the final poster would look like, rather than this actually being the poster. They thought that this was the finished poster when I actually did state at the start that it wasn't. It was just where people would go, the shadows and the colours that would be involved, as well as the fonts. So then I did a little one. Once I'd been to the bonfire and taken some pictures and stuff, I actually thought that a different layout would look a lot better, because it would be very, very hard for me to get the layout that I wanted when I wasn't making the bonfire myself, due to health and safety reasons, and because it was a lot safer, really. So what I decided to do was go with a different layout that looked a bit more sort of confusing and weird. So I went for this poster design. As you can see, you've got the face poking out of the side, which is actually the original picture against the background of the bonfire. And I did that and added the fonts and where the small print would go, and the layout for stuff, and my logos and things and all that sort of thing. But then I got some audience feedback on that because I thought it was quite a cool poster at the time. So I got feedback on it on Facebook, and they liked the contrast, and they liked the feel of the poster, and they sort of make you wonder and things like that. But people said that it was really hard to see the face, and that it wasn't sort of noticeable at first glance. It just looks a bit weird. So I took that into consideration, and I went on Twitter and got some feedback there as well. And they didn't mention the face, but they did mention that the fonts weren't quite right. They weren't quite professional looking enough. So what I did was I went and I had a look on the font, and I had a look on to see basically what other fonts there were and what I could use. So I ended up downloading a few different fonts, and I basically put them all together in Photoshop. I put them all on the same page with different types of fonts. So the top two were what I could have used for the Makers Of font. The middle one was the sort of small print. That was Universal Accreditation, which I eventually changed to Steel Tongues, just because Universal Accreditation, it didn't really have as many, it wasn't as accurate as Steel Tongues, which I didn't actually realise until I looked at some of the posters in a lot more detail. So I went back and changed that and changed it to steel tongues. So we then had the selection of, I believe, Crime Time 6 at the top there. Then we've got October, Scarecrow, and something about Halloween. So Spider's Hook or something, and October Scarecrow. So I let my audience choose between those, and then the makers of fonts. The first two, I sort of just typed in normally, and then the next three I got off the font, and again they're the same fonts as the ones for the title. Crime Time 6, I think it's Spider's Hook and October Scarecrow or something like that. October Crow and Who Asks Satan is the other one, not Spider's Hook. So I then put it on Facebook and asked for their decisions, and as you can see they gave me feedback and things like that, and they decided on Crime Time 6 for the title, Crime Time 6 for the makers of font, and Universal Accreditation or Steel Tongues for the credits. So I was happy with that. I thought it did look professional. I thought it was quite cool. I thought it looked like what I was trying to give off with my poster. So I decided to keep with those fonts because my target audience liked it, and it did look professional as well and fit in my genre. So if we move on now, then I made the poster with the new fonts, and I got a little bit of feedback on that. And they really actually liked it. Josh Stolberg, who is an industry professional, said he loves it, very cool, and he said it was a good job. And then someone else on Twitter said that it was a good job and they really like it. So I think that it's positive. So I stuck with those fonts. I didn't think I needed to alter those fonts anymore. And then again, to back up about the green screen, it's so small at my college, and we didn't have the facilities available to do the poster that I wanted to do. So I had to sort of make do and just go with the poster that I already had. So here is the poster with the new font. Just how I devised it, and I actually really liked it. I thought it was done. I thought it was complete. But I got some feedback from my teacher, who said actually it needs a little bit more. It needs something to link to the narrative a bit more. It wasn't too obvious what the film was about. It needed a bit of a tagline maybe, or something like that. And the small print needed a bit more to it. Just because it was a bit thin, and a few things just needed altering with it basically. So I went back and I went to my whole class, and they came and watched my trailer, looked at my magazine, and looked at my poster, and they gave me a bit of feedback. So they did like the posters. They thought it was good, but again, they felt that maybe the small print, there wasn't enough of it, and it was a bit too noticeable as well. So what I did was look back at my influences, and my poster influences, and I sort of had a think and went back to it. So I thought, well, how could I add narrative? Inspired by my teacher's comments and the feedback of my peers. And I thought, well, I need to show who is in my film, even if they're not big stars. So what I did was I got the two main protagonists or antagonists, we're not really sure yet. You find that out later on in the film, basically. And I thought, what can I show to really bring out their characters. And I thought, well, if I show them with their heads to the side, a bit unconventional, then maybe it'll show that they have something to hide. Maybe it'll show that we're not seeing all of their character, and it shows you who's in the film as well. It might make it look a bit more professional. I don't know. So that's what I did. I put them on, and I added a bit more to the small print there. But again, the layout. I got some feedback again, and the layout didn't seem quite right. The small print looked a bit closed in for the title, and things just looked a bit too low. It wasn't quite centered. So I just went in and I tidied it up a bit. I made the two things the same, but again, once I'd beefed it out, once I'd made it longer, it didn't actually feel like there was enough of the small print there. So I really, really looked deeply into posters like The Conjuring 2 and as I said in my question 2, and I looked really, really quite closely into their small print. And then I got a bit of feedback from my teacher and from my peers again, who said, yeah, you're right. Basically, just a fleeting conversation. I just asked them to come over and I said, is the tagline and the small print too small, or too, is there not enough of it? And they just sort of came over and they just went, yeah, you're right, and they walked away. So there we go. So what I did was I made the title, the tagline, and the small print in line, and I made the small print a little bit less noticeable by lowering the opacity of it a little bit in Photoshop. I then brought the logos and the social media things up a bit with the hashtag, so that it just fitted in a bit more and it seemed more like a block rather than being spaced all over the place, and it framed really well. So then I finally got some feedback on the final poster, and they said it looks cool, nicely done, really, really good, it looks really professional. And then on Facebook again, they said that it fits my genre well, they said that it looks really great, and that they wouldn't change anything about it. They would probably go and see this film. So that is what my audience influenced me to do. Now I'm just going to go over a little bit each section, as it were. So codes and conventions or layout. How did my target audience influence me to change my codes and conventions, or stick to the codes and conventions and the layout? So as I said before, it started off with the draft poster. I won't go back to it because it was quite a while back, but I will put a screenshot on. So it started out with the first poster. The layout is what I decided, and I thought it looked really good. And then I realized that I couldn't do that, which isn't so much target audience feedback. But then I changed my idea a little bit, and I really looked at it and asked my audience for feedback when I had the face in the flames, and they didn't like the layout of the picture, so I needed to find a way to bring that out more, which is why I added the lips and the chin outline. Rather than just leaving it as a nose, it doesn't make it really very specific that it is a face. And you really do need it to look like a face at that stage, not necessarily later on when I add the pictures of the protagonist in the head. But yeah, so they influenced me to change the layout of the face and my actual picture on the poster. They also made me change my font, which is the layout as well. It's the genre conventions. We wanted a font that fitted the psychological horror conventions, and they really chose one that did that. I made them choose. So they were my main aspect in the choosing of the font. So they really did help me with that and the conventions there. They helped me with the colours. If I wasn't sure about a colour, I would go and check it by them first. So I checked it by them, and they liked the colours in the first draft with the block hands. and they thought it was good. So that's why I kept with that sort of dark, conventional horror color scheme. Then the whole tagline and be the small print being too short for the actual thing that I'm trying to show. So having that in line was really influenced by my target audience as well. Let's move on to media language. So they sort of influenced my masthead. They influenced all of my color schemes and the conventions of a poster, the small print, the fonts, and really the tools that I used as well. They said that they wanted the face to be more prominent, so I had to add on with the blur tool and the clone tool and the paintbrush tool and things like that. And then I used the refine edge tool to really get that definition of the face, and it really did work. It looked quite crisp. And I think that they really influenced me to do that, because if I hadn't have checked with them, I think I would have still gone with just the nose, and it wouldn't be as clear as to the shadow being a face. So genre, again, I think that I have really represented my genre well in my poster. Um, we've got a load of the horror conventions. We've got reds, we've got oranges, we've got yellows, we've got blacks, we've got browns, really dingy colours. And the fact that the writing is white and tinged with the grey, it really shows that there's something not quite right. The innocence isn't completely there. No one is completely innocent. So it really gives off that feel of a psychological horror poster. If we then go to like even the logos down at the bottom, they're very conventional with horror, because they're very horror themed. There's a demon slashing through the Pandemonium productions, all of that sort of thing, along with the low-key lighting. It's really quite sinister and scary, and I think that that links to my genre, because you're not going to look at this poster and say it's a romantic comedy. You're not going to look at this poster and say that it's even a thriller, really, because it really does give off those conventions of a lot of darkness and fear. And that's what I really wanted to convey, and I think that my audience have helped me to convey that, because they've given me tips on when it's not quite right, and I've been able to change that because they have pointed it out to me, when me staring at it for hours on end, I wouldn't have noticed it. So representation, the representation of the protagonists really is quite unconventional, but conventional at the same time. Ethan and David both look very sinister, and a lot of men are seen as the bad guys in a horror film. Men have power, men are not inferior. But again, if we look back at question 1 and question 2, and we think about how this poster and the trailer work together, for instance, we see a completely different side of both Ethan and David. In the trailer, Ethan is quite a feminized person, whereas in this poster he looks quite manly and quite ready to fight with someone. He looks like he's angry and he's got something to hide, whereas in the trailer we don't really see that. And then with David as well, he looks like a family man almost, no troubles, whereas in the magazine he looks really roughed up and ready for a fight. And that's something that sort of shows the representation of my characters. And yes, okay, my representation of my characters is shown much more in my trailer and my magazine rather than my poster, whereas in my poster it's not shown as prominently, but it is still an aspect that is there. Reaching my audience. Now, I feel like I have reached my audience with this poster as well. With the fonts, because I really based that around my target audience. I think I'm reaching my audience with the font because they are the ones who chose it. They had an input in that. So putting their interests first really means that my poster targets them directly, because they were involved in that decision and they know that that is targeted to them. And then as well with the ages of the protagonists in the pictures, my target audience are young. They're young, and the people in this film are young as well. And I think that really comes across, and that is how I target my audience as well. They have someone to relate to. They have another young person to relate to in my film, and in the poster, and that really targets my audience, because if they relate to it, they're more likely to go and see it. They'll think, oh, that could be me, and they'll want to know more about this guy. They'll know more about the psychology of the people of that generation. They'll know more about the mental health issues and things like that, which is a strong factor in my film, actually. So they might have that aspect relayed to them through the pictures and through the poster, and that's how I target my audience as well. Also, the colors. I think that men in particular go towards darker colors and more warm colors than cool colors. So that really targets them as well, because it is quite dark and it has warm colors in it as well. And it feels quite dangerous, and men are known for being quite dangerous stereotypically. The narrative. We could see a little bit of the narrative in this poster. How far would you go to find justice for your friends being the main part? We know that someone's got to do something to find justice for his friends now, and we want to know what the bonfire's got to do with this. So if we look at the bonfire, we think, right, does he have to go into the bonfire maybe? Does he have to find who threw someone into the bonfire? We know that the bonfire's got something to do with it. Then the pictures. We know that these people have something to hide. We know that they're not great. We know that there's something that's going to make them change as a person. An event that they're going to have to go through, a journey that isn't going to be nice. And that's how I relay the narrative as well. So that is basically how my target audience influenced the changes and the design and everything in my poster, and how I really took them into consideration when producing and constructing my poster. Evaluation question 3. What have you learned from your audience feedback?